Hello guys, today I'm going over 14 alchemy brews of me that I probably don't have time to showcase otherwise, so let's do that. Most of them are for best of 3, but those 3 are for best of 1. So let's start with the new ones. Put this over here. Alright, so this is a Vexyr attack tiers here. I don't know how you pronounce that. Deck that is basically a Seek deck, right? So you have some Seek themes going on in Inquisitor Captain, Jukai Liberator, Innovative Meta-Tech, and maybe the Clement if you specialize it for blue. Let's say you have a 1-drop or an extra Unctus, an extra Vexyr, or the Island, you can specialize it for blue, and then you get to Seek cards. So the idea is, yeah, I know I have some weak flyers in there, but I come to that in a second. So one of the first things you want to do with these or with the deck in general is to play a 1-drop flyer, right? And then to follow it up with a Innovative Meta-Tech or a Jukai Liberator, because then you get to Seek right away with the Meta-Tech or with Liberator. And this is especially also good if you, let's say, are screwed on 2 mana and you want to find the third one, which is really nice. It's just this like Abundant Harvest effect, which is really powerful in general. So this is a very good alchemy card in general, but in this deck it makes a lot of sense because it has this Seek ability attached to it. And the great thing then, if you have those two in, or one of those two, and play with the 1-drop obviously before, is then you get to Seek right away technically with the Vexyr. I say technically because obviously the opponent has also cards and interacts with your strategy sometimes, Zatch, but that's just how magic works. But yeah, this is, I think, what you want to do with this card, right? Because ideally, you want to have the effect right away, so this is a way to do it, and I was really glad when I found that. Another great thing with that kind of idea is that your next curve topper is the Inquisitor Captain as your 4-drop, and this card is one of the best creature cards which you can play in Alchemy in general already. So he has this like cascade effect attached to it, where you get to Seek 2 random cards from your deck with CMC3LS, and then you get to choose one of them and get to put it into play, which is decent by itself, but that's just a Seek right away with Vexyr. And create the golem. Maybe you also want to ask yourself the question, well, what's better to create a cool artifact golem with Vexyr? Well, 2 artifact golems. You can also play Trove Mage. So if you basically follow up Vexyr with Inquisitor Captain and you get the first Seek, create a golem, you can technically hit a Trove Mage and then you get to Seek a second time and make a second golem right away. So that's pretty cool, of course. I had the Trove Mage in there first. I have, by the way, some matches in the end of this video which feature this deck and the next deck I'm going to show after this. So you have some gameplay to see how they do maybe on the ladder. There are fun decks, by the way. They're not supposed to be super competitive because Alchemy has some really broken cards, but I think it's playable, I think it's good, and yeah, it's fun. I think it has some wild cards which you have to get though, so that is that, and that is where Trove Mage maybe could come in handy because he's only an uncommon. Seeks an artifact card, pretty much always hits because he looks at the top 10, and yeah, I took it out because I have like 1-drops in there and I don't want to Seek 1-drops, and he's a 3-mana 2/2, so yeah, you don't want to play that in general, but he's a decent card. And yeah, by the way, I forgot to say this, I have a link in the description to my public EtherHub page, I think, where you can find all of these decks and get to export them to Arena if you are interested in doing so. So these are the Seek cards, the Captain, the Liberator, the Meta-Tech, and the Clement for blue if you have something to specialize with that. Another like option could be the Spawning Pod, but yeah, I go over this in a second. Okay, so that's the main idea, you know, go 1, 2, 3 with this, but those are 1/1s, right? You don't want to play 1/1s. This is bad. So you have Clement to like buff the team in general. This is one of the best cards in Alchemy, which you can also play as a creature card in a creature deck. I like to say heavily creature based deck with 34. You can also play Talia in this, by the way, but I wanted to focus on synergies. That's why there is not a her in the main deck so far. So yeah, Clement, very good card. So buffing the 1-drops with that is really nice because then they are 1-mana 2/2s. But what's better than 1-mana 2/2s? Of course, 1-mana 3/3s. Unctus is basically your lord in this deck. You have a bunch of artifact creatures already, but if they are not artifact creatures on their own, Unctus can make them into artifact creatures. Of course, this is also true for Innovative Meta-Tech, so Unctus can make the Meta-Tech into a artifact creature, him or her, whatever, self, and then you get to Seek with the Meta-Tech attacking by himself, which is pretty good, of course. And yeah, this card is just great in general because each time one of your blue creatures gets tapped, you get to loot, which is really strong, to fix your hands, get rid of extra lands or finding lands if you need some of them, or just to find specific cards like removal spells. Maybe you're digging for your reality chip, which is one of the best card draw spells, I think, in standard / alchemy. So Ankh is just a very great flexible card, which is just good because it's an anthem effect at worst, and it also has like decent stats, so it does not like get removed right by damage effects from, let's say, mono red, which is pretty prevalent in the best of 1 alchemy format. Mono red and the Demir, what's his card name? Rusko Clockmaker. Those are pretty popular. The Demir deck because of Tasha, I think, because that just lines up so well versus 1 toughness creatures by putting -1/-1 counters on her. Speaking of Tasha, this can remove her. You also can play this, of course, decently versus creature-based decks that are aggressive, like mono red, because you get life equal to the dealt amount of damage. You deal X damage, where X is the amount of creatures you have. So Lantern Flare, pretty good card. I had Portable Hole in there first, but you know, I play a creature deck. Tasha's quite annoying versus us too, so I think that card makes sense in that spot. You can, by the way, maybe also play Progress Charm, which fulfills a similar purpose, but it costs one more mana. The upside, of course, is that you also can hit enchantments. Let's say you up against the Cabaretti Revels Naya deck, which is pretty strong on its own and also lines up decently versus mono red. I think that's one of the main reasons why it is in the format, but it could get pushed out if mono red gets pushed back. But yeah, you can also draw 2 cards, but the card is just too clunky, right? It costs 3 mana, so... But yes, maybe an option. And yeah, there's also, by the way, the option to play this main deck. This is nice because it costs 1 mana and also has this equal to the numbers of creatures damage. And the creature also loses all abilities perpetually, so like forever. That's really good, I think. So this card is pretty cute. Let's say they attack with a Shaldred or a Obliterator. You can double block the Shaldred with Clement and Captain, getting them 5 power and 5 toughness together. And then Shaldred loses Death Touch. It's still a 2-for-1, but it being so cheap and just removing the only good thing is then probably still worth it, or you just attack into a big creature and then can finish it off. And yeah, versus Obliterator, you don't have to sacrifice your things, right, because you remove the ability. So if cards like that get very common in best of 1, I could see this over Lantern Flare, because it's 1 mana cheaper and it like works versus Obliterator, which some people really play. I don't get it, but I guess versus mono red. But this just being able to hit Tasha, I think, is quite nice. And of course the life gain is quite nice as well. And technically you can also cast it for its cleave cost by playing a Crossroads on red. Yeah, like you have some more things. Of course, you have removal in the deck. This is cool because it's an artifact creature for the meta tech, and it has 4 toughness, which is nice versus mono red. Alternatively, you could play something like Rasad or Purul Cathar. Again, if there's more like, because another really common strategy in Alchemy Best of 1 is to play the Cry of the Conarium, like each creature gets -2/-2 effect from Kamigawa. And you want to really play around that as much as possible by playing some bigger creatures, so there is that to keep in mind. And again, it's pretty decent versus mono red to have 4 toughness, same with the Unctus and the Vexyr and yeah, stuff like that. Also the reality chip fulfills that role because you can both use it versus aggro by being a decent blocker on turn 2, or it's just a great card versus a more mid-range deck, right, because you can then use its equip ability and draw a lot of cards. But yeah, that's pretty much that. The options are maybe also a Bankbuster or a Hearse. Maybe the Reanimator strategy gets very popular, like when I want to bring back Atraxa or play the Chant Titan of Industry Reanimator thing, then you can maybe play this in the main deck, because Hearse I think is just actually a main deckable card in general, but versus very aggressive decks like Mono Red, it's not so good right on turn 2. And you have the like upside for it being an artifact for the meta tech, and the Bankbuster is of course also a very, very solid card in general. It gets crewed by Vexyr and Liberator on 3, and technically the Captain on 4, but you just care about the 3-drops, and your 3-drops, half of them are, or even more than half, are Unctus and Annex Sentry, and they cannot crew the Bankbuster, which I think is just too relevant in a creature deck to include it, but you can still include it, I think. I think just all of these options are quite great. And yeah, that's my Vexyr Bant Seek deck, which I think is pretty cool. It's cool, it's fun, it's good, but it's not top tier, right? All these like broken things people are sometimes doing with the sometimes also very optimized deck lists are hard to overcome, right? But I think it's a cool take on trying to do something new. Then next up we have Metal Poison, best of 1. Yeah, Nettling Host, someone made it work. I'm not sure if I'm the one who made it work, but I tried, okay? So this basically gives you a payoff for playing Toxic and artifacts and or enchantments. So this is a 3-mana 3/3 with Toxic 2, and if you have Corrupted, you get to choose to exile the card from the graveyard and get to conjure, is it conjure? Yeah, Nettlecyst in your hand, which is just a really good payoff for playing artifacts and or enchantments, which we are doing, and sees like play in Historic as well. So that is the idea of the deck for some part. The other part is to just hit with flyers in the sky and make them big with Michikos, make them big with the Retrofitter, which also has Toxic, or to draw with them with the innovative Metatect. So that's the reason why we have some artifact creature flyers. Those are the only ones in the format, meaning Alchemy / Standard, so that's why we have to choose them. By the way, most of the creatures are Phyrexians, so you can play the Seed Core, and you should play more if you have them. I usually don't play Toxic decks, that's why I only have 1 in there. But yeah, other than the Disruptor, you have, I think, 24 Phyrexians and total 26 creatures. Okay, so you attack in the sky, make them big, draw. That's cool. But what's cooler? Giving them lifelink. So this is the second like corrupted ability you have in the deck. Scrolls Hive is also like a thing that ties things together, right? Because it's an enchantment, it makes artifact creatures, and it makes an artifact creature on each of your upkeeps. So that's pretty nice with Michikos, because the longer this goes on, the more artifacts you have and the bigger your creatures get. And if you swing for a lot of lifelink, that is pretty good, right? So yeah, this is also just supposed to be a like fun deck, because those cards on its own are just really not good. But if you have Michikos, if you have the Retrofitter, if you have the Metatech, they are enablers, right? Because then you get to Seek. Michikos does not care about how big the creature is, because the creature is gonna be pretty big because of that card, and you get to close out the game probably in like 2 or 3 turns with that, so that's pretty nice. And this card also does not care about the size, it just makes it into a 4/4 regardless. By the way, it does work with a card like Portable Hole, or maybe you don't want to use that, because then you can no longer equip, which is something to keep in mind, but you can use any artifact and make it into a 4/4. The downside is as long as you control the Retrofitter, but yeah, it has Toxic, it synergizes with artifacts, it synergizes with your flyers, which you have to play already, so might as well put it into the deck. Another creature that buffs your flyers is Unctus. I talked about it in the last deck, makes a lot of sense, of course. In the deck is an artifact creature himself. Again, is pretty nice with Metatech, because he can make Metatech into an artifact himself. Technically, you can also give the non-toxic creatures that bonus by attaching a injector to it. And this card I have in decks like this, I also mentioned this, I think, in the Naya Belt deck from the channel. This is pretty relevant, I think, in Best of 1 Alchemy right now, because most of the removal spells are like toughness reduction orientated, like either red damage based removal spells or black removal spells that are minus effects, like the Cry of Canarium from Kamigawa of the let's say the Mir deck, or any black deck, which is just pretty good versus mono red, or like Tasha's ability. So I think giving extra toughness can work as a protection spell in a sense, and it's still an artifact which is cool in the deck, and it only has equip 1 and it gives Toxic, and you want to give those flyers Toxic, right, to have Corrupted. And yeah, you then fill the deck up with, of course, Scrolf's perfect artifact, Toxic, protects your creatures. And yeah, this looks a little silly, I know, but what else you gonna put in your deck when it comes to 1-drops with Toxic? There's just not a whole lot else to put in these colors, and it does create a Toxic artifact creature when it dies, so that's pretty useful, of course, because we want those artifact Toxic creatures. Again, fun deck. It is playable, I think. Have some matches in the end with that and the Vexyr Seek deck, so you can see how it goes. And yeah, that's that. Is there something else? I had this also, I think, in the beginning, because the upside of this is, of course, that you get to draw a card when it dies, and this is pretty reasonable versus mono red too, because you often don't need more than 1 power to trade with one of their good creatures, and what are they gonna do? Remove it, and then you still get to draw, so that's pretty good. It does not work if they have Kumano in play, by the way, but I was trying that before, because the Vigilance is also relevant. It's an artifact creature, it flies, but costing 2 mana, of course, is worse than 1 mana, so that's why I did it this way. Mirrex, by the way, pretty good in this deck, because it makes artifact creatures. And yeah, obviously you have Portable Hole in there as well, but that's pretty much it. And yes, I cast Nettlecyst, and yes, it feels good. Alright, then next up we have Combo Priest, which is a cool like party/angels/priest of possibility deck. Priest of Possibility is a cool alchemy card that lets you look at the top 7 cards of your library, and then amongst them you get to put any abilities onto Priest perpetually that are like flying, first strike, double strike, death touch, haste. We don't have indestructible and hexproof, unfortunately. This is something interesting that you might be able to do in historic, let's say, but yeah, that's a pretty good card in general, of course. Now here we are trying to do this with the following cards. I think the best modes to get often are lifelink and flying. You can get this from Archangel of Wrath or Angel of Unity, which is already a good card, especially if you play the party cards, of course. And you get Flying and Vigilance of Giada. You can get the double strike ability from Lysel or the Enduring Angel. The Enduring Angel is a card I put out and then in and out and in, and had it out for quite some while, but eventually put it back in then again, because it's not so good on its own, right? It just dies to Doomblade, and it's just a 5 mana 3/3. But in the format, when Crucius got released, people were starting to play Invoke Despair a lot, and it shuts that card down, which is, I think, pretty good and works also like versus the 3 mana Liliana, because you have hexproof and then you can't be targeted. So that's something to keep in mind, but having double strike in the deck is just really nice for the priest, because this is like kind of the best thing you can get, I think. Lifelink, flying, and double strike. Ideally you also have haste from the devil or the ambergris, which by the way are party types. We are trying to play as many party types as possible, but yeah, that's one of your best priest hits. And the next important, not necessarily, but the next good thing / important thing for the priest is to maybe buff it if possible. You can do this with Clement when you play it before it. Like if you have a Clement in hand and a priest, you do this in general, but you always play the Clement first. And the same is true for Archangel of Unity, especially if you have multiple copies. Just play those first and then play the priest. Just have some patience. I think it is always worth waiting a little bit. So yeah, let's go maybe over the others real quick. This is an angel. This is the worst card probably. I really dislike this card. It does see play in Mardu Angels in Standard, I think, but I just really don't like this card. In this deck I just had to include it, I felt like, because it checks just all the boxes, right? It's a Cleric for the party theme, it's an Angel for Giada, it has a relevant keyword for the priest, so I have it in there because of that. But if there is a better fit for the deck being released, I'm always looking out for new sets. When new sets get released, if there are good party cards in there, which I can put in there, or like good angels or something. And one cool thing about the deck is that you get to play Eater of Virtue, because the abilities that get attached to the priest are perpetual, and that counts actually for the sword. In the beginning I was not sure, but it does actually work. So when a creature dies that has the sword attached to it, then those abilities get then attached to the sword in a sense, and if you attach the sword then the next time to another creature, it gets also that ability. So that is just a really nice payoff for the deck in general, and like one of the only decks that can actually abuse this cool ability of the Eater of Virtue, which is really nice. The sword has also a cool synergy with Devilish Valet. Now this is for some part in there because of priest, of course. It's really nice to have some sort of extra evasion besides flying with trample. Trample is not the best evasion, but with double strike it's really good still, and has of course haste, which is very nice to also have with the priest, but the cards have to be really good enough on their own to be able to make it in the deck, so that's why I only have 5 haste creatures, otherwise I would include more of them. Now why this is playable on its own, I think, is because you can buff it with Angel and Clement and the sword. And let's say you play it on turn 3 after your 2-drop, then you can attack for 2 damage right away. But the next turn, often, not always, but often, on turn 4 you can just double spell because you have quite some 2-drops, and then it attacks for 8 trample damage, which is pretty decent for a 3-drop, right? So yeah, that's the role of the devil, and obviously it's best with like a sword or multiple buffs. And if you have a devil in hand and if you have multiple ways to buff it, you always play the buff effects first, of course, and then play this as your last card and try to bring multiple creatures into play. Another cool way of making multiple creatures is with the red Lysel, which you can make with a devil, a mountain, or a Chetmir's Garden. The green, by the way, is also pretty cool, but because green Lysel buffs your board and the creatures in hand, I think. Yeah. Creatures you control and creature cards in your hand get perpetually +1/+1, but the red one especially is really nice with the devil. This can just be a out of nowhere finisher in the late game, especially if you get, you just specialize for only 1 mana, and especially if you have then another creature to also play, so you get to double its power 3 times. And obviously this is even better if you have already buffed it with an Angel or a Clement, or maybe it has already the sword on it. So that's something to keep in mind. And yep. And Archangel is just a really nice card on its own. We're splashing black for it. We also have 2 Crystal Grottos, which is just a really good land to have in the deck to not maybe get screwed or flooded as much. Just one of my pet lands basically. And Lysel is just a very good alchemy card on her own, because she makes it really hard for the opponent's creatures to be able to attack us because of her double strike and protection ability attached to it. So whenever this creature gets targeted by a spell of the opponent, you may choose to flicker her, and then if it already has specialized, because she always says when this creature enters the battlefield you get the effect right away, so the opponent is not really invited to target her, let's say this way. But they can interrupt, by the way. If you specialize, the opponent can respond with a removal spell at instant speed, and then yeah, you can still do it again, but you still lose the card that you have discarded, and it stops her transformation, basically. But yeah, that's pretty much the deck. You play a bunch of angels here, of course, Enduring Angel, Archangel, Overseer, Giada, and the Angel of Unity. You have a bunch of party cards, you have this cool priest card, and yeah, it's just another cool creature deck. In case you didn't know, I like creature decks. But let's go to another one. So next up we have Spirits. Let's see, put this over here. So Spirits get a buff with one of the last, if not the last, balance patch for Alchemy and Historic. So Dorothea was already an okay card, but it was just too clunky, because you cannot, like, the idea is to have her as a good blocker, right? Because you still get your value in a sense by having a 2 mana for blocker in this guy, which is just good. But if you play a more aggressive deck, sorry, 1 second. So if you play a little bit more of an aggressive deck, obviously not being able to attack without losing the creature is not good. But in this deck you just discard her, and now instead of 3 you pay 2 mana for the Dorothea's Retribution enchantment aura, which lets you enchant a creature, and then each time the creature attacks you create a 4/4 spirit which enters the battlefield tapped and attacking, which is really nice. So having basically a 2 mana 4/4 haste spirit is really nice. It being a spirit is relevant because of cards like Catilda, for example, if you attack with her right away. But yeah, that's one Disturb card that got buffed, which we play. The other one is the Catgeist. It's not that great. It costs 2 mana to use the backside, and you get only a +1/+1, but being able to draw then is pretty good. I don't think there's a better option to play, but yeah, you need these like Disturb cards which you can use from the graveyard to get as much value out of the cards as possible, I think. A very cool card, I think, is the Sifters, because I like these cards which enable you to fix your hand when it comes to your land count. Let's say you miss lands, then you can discard, which is nice with the Sifters because you're likely to be able to put a +1/+1 counter on it. You can discard a creature card or maybe an enchantment, which then not triggers the Sifters. And if you have too many lands, you can always get rid of a land, you don't get the counter, but that's still good, right? The same is true for the Modern Age, which draws and discards and then flips into an enchantment creature spirit. Cards like this are obviously really nice with Geistlight Snare, because then you can cast the counterspell for only 1 mana, which is really strong and one of the big payoffs of decks like this. I think I've also covered one spirit deck already on the channel. It's one of the first videos, I think, and I think this is actually very strong. This is a Bant spirit deck. But yeah, this is Alchemy, and it has a couple of these like buffed cards. Another one would be the devoted Gravekeeper, which now mills 4 cards instead of 2. It get 1 more toughness, and the Departed Soulkeeper on the backside can now block, which is relevant as well. So this, I think, is a really good card for the deck, kind of a centerpiece. And yeah, you have Catilda, which you can cast from the graveyard, which is really good. But of course, the 3 mana fat creature in the sky is very good with the lifelink ability. I'm sure you knowing this card, you get some card advantage in the Illuminator, which is nice. It can also exile cards from the graveyard each time it attacks, or if it enters the battlefield. You can also cast something on the opponent's turn with the Geistlight Snare, which is something to keep in mind in Wedding Announcement. Obviously, great card. I was trying out the Welcome there as well, but you can just play a 4th Wedding Announcement. Then it is real nice by the way, because it protects your graveyard, but you can still use the Disturb stuff in the deck. So I think that deck is pretty cool. Got some relevant sideboard cards. Then let's see on my little list what is next. Next up is Gobbos. Alright, so Gobbos got 1 buffed card from the last balance patch or whatever, I think. So this is not the most relevant card, I'm just mentioning this because of that. This basically now costs 1 mana, and you can then rummage, which is nice because this is some sort of a combo deck in a sense. Because, I mean, you have strong cards like Crucius and Fable to make your deck thinner. You have this to thin your deck, you have this to thin your deck. And it basically revolves around Goblin Influx Array, the Hordemaster, and Battlecry Goblin. And this card if you have it, but you don't need it. So with the Influx Array, your Goblin spells cost 1 less. If you have 2 of them, this affects decks, and most of the new Goblins basically cost either 1 or 0 mana, which is really nice. And if you have this card, each time a Goblin enters the battlefield, you basically you draw a card, which is really good. And if you attack with your Goblins, you draw a lot of cards, which is nice. I mean, it costs 5 mana, but if you have an Influx Array in play and you play this and then right away Goblins, I think this is really nice, and you draw also right away if you attack with the Goblins in play. It's just an experiment, but it worked pretty well when I was trying it, and yeah, I was quite happy with that. You want to protect those enchantments a little bit, so playing for Fables is a must, not only because you get Goblins with that, which is perfect, and because the card is just really good and makes your deck thinner, which is really good, and fixes your hand when it comes to lands and stuff, which is really good, but it also protects the most important enchantments in the deck. And I was thinking about another enchantment which can fulfill that kind of job, which also synergizes with the deck in a sense, but I really was not finding any in those colors. So yeah, I just tried Black Market Connections, which creates shapeshifter tokens with Changeling, and Changeling makes those tokens also into Goblins, which is cool. So this is just an experiment. But yeah, Crucius is obviously really nice to find those arrays, or the discovery if you like, discard a sniper, and yeah, that's pretty much the deck. Ideally you have, by the way, a Prospector when you have these kind of cards in play, because the Prospector together with the Hordemaster allows you to kind of like really go through your deck, because the Hordemaster hits in more Goblins, and you have the draw from the discovery and stuff like that. But yeah, this is just, I think, a decent Goblin deck for Alchemy. It plays a bunch of cards that I also see play in historic Goblin decks like the Hordemaster, the Battlecry Goblin, the Crucius, the Fable, the Arrays, I think, being played sometimes. So yeah, I think pretty interesting deck for Alchemy. So let's check which is the next one. The next one is Attack, Boros. So this reminds of the mono red deck with, at least I tried, also the best white cards which are in the format. Of course, Nalia makes a lot of sense. We have some sorceries in there, 2 pranks, 3 enthusiasms, but that's it. We have 27 creatures. I think she's still worth her slot. And then we have Clement, which is one of the best creatures in a creature deck for Alchemy too, because it's just like a 2-mana lord, which it's like it reminds of a card like Talia's Lieutenant maybe, because it puts the counters on the creatures not in play but in your hand. So this makes Clement really nice on turn 2, and he's also just good in the late game, and his specialize abilities are just really decent as well. So this is just a very great card, which I think you can play as a 4-off because of that. Because if you specialize, you can then still play another copy of it because he is legendary. Another great synergy with the Clement is the Tiefling Outcast, which is a lord for, I mean, he's a Tiefling himself, which is a lord for Tieflings, Demons, Imps, and Devils. This is your Devil, the big spender. I mean, you know this from Mono Red probably, so I'm not going over this too much. And, you know, you play a Folden and you have some Initiates, Recruitment Officer. I think the deck was really cool, but it has not too many, like, exciting cards, so I'm just mentioning it briefly. Then what's next? Next is Simic Grave. Where's this? It's over there. Okay, so this is a Graveyard Synergy green-blue deck, which also has Geistlight Snare. You see, I quite like this card because I don't think it's quite fair. So you have a number of spirits and enchantments, and you fill the deck up with other great cards that synergize heavily with what the deck is trying to do, like Ledger Shredder or the Oglo Devoted Assistant. Oglo is really nice because of a number of reasons in the deck. He's helping you as same as the Sifters or the one of Modern Age or the Shredder with finding your lands, because you're not playing too many. I'm playing 20 plus 3 of the Commune with Spirits, which you can just play on turn 1 if you only have 1 or 2 lands. And but playing less lands is just so good with Shredder, but Ogla also helps to find your third land or whatever. So this card is really nice because you are milling and discarding cards, and if you mill or discard a creature card, it gets this perpetual. Whenever this card leaves your graveyard, create a tapped 2/2 black zombie creature token, which is just a good bonus on top, I think. But there's also like a small combo in the deck with Split the Spoils. This lets you exile up to 5 target permanent cards from your graveyard, and then you get to separate those into 2 piles, and an opponent chooses one of those piles, and then you can put the pile the opponent chose into your hand. So usually you're drawing the 2 best cards in your graveyard with this, because the opponent does not want to give you 3 cards. But if those 2 cards are too good, you draw 3 cards with a 2-mana sorcery, which is really nice, I think. But if you have also a Ogler in play, and let's say you have like 2, 3, maybe even 4 creatures, maybe ideally 5, but that's Disneyland, creatures in the graveyard, each time you exile one of those creatures, because this exiles, you get 2/2 zombies. So that's like, I think, a really cool combo to also have in the deck by playing those cards, which are good on their own. So you can make like 3 or 4 2/2 zombies by casting Split the Spoils with an Oglo in play, which is cool. Otherwise, we're just playing some spirits that have synergies with enchantments, or synergies with the graveyard theme that we have going on. A great card that ties things together is Teachings of the Kirin, which I think people slowly are coming around to, because it's just probably the best 2-mana enchantment, or one of the best 2-mana enchantments which you can cast in Standard or Alchemy. And this fulfills a number of roles. It mills the graveyard, it exiles cards from the graveyard eventually with the touched Kirin Orochi, which is nice for the Willowgeist. It's an enchantment which is relevant for the deck. It makes a spirit which is relevant for the deck. It enables basically Geistlight Snare on its own, which is really nice. The Modern Age can also do that, but it's a little bit slower because you get the Vector Collider in 2 turns after you cast that card. And another card which can do that is the Kami of Bamboo Groves, which is an enchantment creature spirit, which basically acts like a, what's the card's name? Arboreal Grazer, like you can put an extra land card onto the battlefield, which is not what exactly the deck wants to do, but I didn't find a better option for the slot. But you can definitely experiment around. Like you can play maybe the, what's it called? The Sprout. I had that originally in the deck. The thing with the Sprout is it does not have too much synergy with the other cards other than being a great 1-mana graveyard payoff. It's nice with Willow Guys because you can exile cards if it transforms into the Death Opponent Hulk, but yeah, I was taking it out because I really needed enough enchantments and spirits. So yeah, that's that deck, and I really like decks like these where you are play very low to the ground, you cast a ton of cheap cards, have cool synergies, you interact with the opponent's expensive things and just make it disappear, and then do your like cool thing on your own for a little cost. Talking about little cost and cool thing, favorite enemy, I forgot about that card almost, is another enchantment that you can, by the way, also hit off Commune with Spirit, but you might think this is not so good because you have so many like small power cards, but these cards grow, right? The Swifters grow, the Shredder grows very consistently, the Kami of Transience can grow, even the Willow Guys can grow, so you can use this surprisingly often, I think, and you also get then counters with the ability of this card because you get to, I mean, it automatically picks the most prevalent type of the creatures the opponent has, and then whenever a creature with the type of the opponent gets removed, you get to put a counter on one of your cards, and of course this effect stacks if you have multiple favorite enemy enchantments. So I think this is very nice. It's just a fun deck. It's probably also not top tier, but I think it's very cool to play. Then next up we have 5-color Legends, Poggers. So this is a Joda the Unifier deck, but I also have a little twist in there. Nalia de Anis is one of my, it's probably my second favorite card on Arena. This is a party synergy card. Now the party ability kind of like rotated out already out of standard or / alchemy, so this is like one of the last things that is still in there. There's like a Baldur's Gate sweeper or something else maybe that I can think of, but I still wanted to try this when it came out, and I was like, oh no, this is such a cool party card, but party is going to rotate. What am I gonna do? How am I gonna play this? But yeah, I just tried to still play it. I have a second deck that I have with her, which I show in a second, but yeah, this is basically trying to use this with Joda because he is a wizard, Ratatrabik is a wizard, and you just have a bunch of legends which are the party types. This is your warrior, this is a warrior, that's just no better other warrior, I think, than Shan, unfortunately, so you have a bunch of ways to gain life in the Elios core, the Shadowheart or the Clement. Now Clement and Shadowheart have to specialize for that being able to work, but I just don't think there's a better warrior to put into this deck. You play this deck if you want to play it ideally differently. I just wanted to have some fun and play Nalia alongside of Joda, and I think this is a pretty reasonable deck to queue up in Alchemy, but you can just play this a number of ways. Just play a random Joda deck with some cool Alchemy legends or just some standard legends, and yeah, call it a day. I'm not sure if there's too much to mention about the deck. You have some interesting sideboard cards maybe, but yeah, link is in the description if you want to check it out. Maybe to mention is that you have to have some non-party creatures that you have to play in the deck, like you need removal spells. You probably need Talia because you're mostly playing only creatures aside from the relic, and Skrulf just has to be in there as well, especially because of the Joda, because you want a 1-drop if you cast a 2-drop after you cast the Joda. Okay, next we have, yeah, Esper Nalia, that makes sense. Okay, so this is a more usual Nalia deck that is also a lot better in enabling the full party. I didn't mention this, but you basically get to put a +1/+1 counter on each of your creatures if you have the full party going on with Nalia, and they all gain Death Touch until end of turn, which is really good. Like the Death Touch is, I think, underestimated. It's very strong because you can just attack with everyone, no matter if the opponent has more toughness than the card that attacks, and of course power, and she is like reminds of like Frenzy or something like that, because you can party cards off the top of a library, which is of course really good. I didn't mention this before, but yeah, that's obviously what Nalia does, and then you just play a bunch of like strong clerics and other party types in the deck. Angel of Unity, I think, is a great payoff for the deck as well, because it's like a true mana lord effect similar to Clement. But yeah, maybe you know this list already, but when I built it, no one was playing it. All right, then we have Clerics next. This is also... Where are the Clerics? Oh, this. This is also a creature-based deck. If you have not already noticed, I like creature decks. So this also plays the Angel and the Clement, which are just really strong decks for Alchemy. I think when I played this a lot, there was a lot of like Blood Artist in the format, so a card like Angel of Unity is very good because of that. This guy also has lifelink, but right now this deck is not as prevalent, so I'm not sure if I can recommend this, but it's just a cool deck overall. I think it's a lot better than standard Clerics because of Angel of Unity and Clement. You also have this as a 3-mana Lord effect, both for the creatures you have in play and in your hand. And the upside with cards like this or Clement is that you get the perpetual buff effect. So even if you remove the construct, which then the opponent is, by the way, then no longer interested in doing so, even if you remove that, you still get to keep the buff. Like +1/+1 counters, but a little better, because if you play something like the Phyrexian Missionary on its kicker side, you get to pick up the card from the graveyard with still the buff. And then you also have something going on with the Shadowrite Priest. Not only is he a 2-mana Lord, which is already pretty decent, right? But you have some like silver bullets which you can pick up from the deck. The best one is probably just Toxtrol. I think because of that he's just worth including. I was at first hesitant to put something expensive and in general non-synergistic like that into the deck, but you just so often have this card in 5 mana. Like if you have this card and get to 5 mana, you have a Toxtrol. Like that's good, you know, so that's what I ended up putting into the deck, and I just was happy with that. If you are scared of maybe like a Go for the Throat being open from the opponent, you can also just start with Liaison maybe, because then I would have to either remove Liaison first, or Liaison protects the Toxtrol kind of, because you get it back to hand. You already had to have 5 mana, then you get slower and slower towards the point where you can just cast it. So I think this is something cool to include. But I'm not sure about it. You can just play a Clerics deck and don't play these like cards. Sometimes maybe you need some extra points of damage to just close out the game. Maybe the board is very stalled, and then shoulder makes sense. Maybe you already drew your Toxtrol, so I have her in here as well. And I also have Black Market Connections, because you have some ways of life as a set to gain, and yeah, you get to draw cards, make more Clerics, and have a good time. Then we have the Avernus decks. I make a quick, I don't have the English word, a quick whatever, towards this. So this is the updated version of the video I featured already on the channel. If you want to check that out, in the description as well, it has the Titania, which is like an alt, not a win condition not a win condition necessarily, like it's just an alternative way to go a little bit over the top. Argoth is also great on its own to mill in the late game if you don't have too much going on, or just need like extra jump blockers, because those tokens don't enter the battlefield tapped for once. Jesus. But yeah, that card is because of that nice, but obviously great with Titania, and you can find it rather consistently because of your 12 like 2-drops that find lands and can pick them up. I think they are in this order strong, like this is probably the best one, then this, then that. This you also got from Brothers War, which is nice. I also have the Recyclers in there, because when you mill them, you can you get to put a second copy of it into the graveyard, which just really speeds up the creature count for the deck. Like by the way, haven't mentioned this as well, but maybe you have already seen the video. This deck wants to put the devil in the deck and then reanimate everything, and then you can haste in for lethal. You usually want to have 2 of the devils, and yeah, that's pretty much that. You can just most of the time it's just enough to have 1 though. I also put a Kale on there because It's cool. We don't have to play her. And the Rakdos boss is also just, its role is to make things faster, basically, right? Because you want to do this sooner than turn 6, because usually you do this for x equals 3, so you need 6 mana. And then Fable, a card like Fable or Rakdos boss is nice for that. But there is a way to make this faster. And of course, this card's name is Crucius Titan of Waves. So this is my Dune approach. I basically added black to the deck because I was wrapping my head around like how to get this darn card into my Naya deck, which I liked a lot because it was just so perfect, right? Because you can cast your Avernus faster, it discards, it fixes your hand. It's just such a good card in general. And you have like 4 Fables, 4 Crucius, and it's just a really good deck. The only problem is like the mana base, of course. I think it just made it work with the numbers, but it's still rough, of course. But yeah, the card quality is just so high that I think it has potential to make up for that because of that. Like, you still have the Potlight Harvester, which obviously is a combo with Fable, but it's just so great for the deck on its own. It's a removal as a creature, which is what the deck really wants. Best of fun because of that. I think you also want to play the Sniper over the Inquisitor Captain. Like, this is a best of fun version. Otherwise, I think you play the Captain, which you can channel for 2 mana to deal 2 damage to any target. Also in the late game, this is nice to copy with Fable though. But the Harvester also, by being a removal spell, has 2 roles for the Graveyard synergy. It puts itself into the graveyard and it generates the blood token, which then you can use to, let's say, put a Devilish Valet into the graveyard, which can be pretty nice, of course, and is sometimes just what you want. You also have Taiva to reanimate, let's say, a Harvester and give it haste right away. If you have 4 mana, you can, or have 2 extra mana with the Taiva or whatever, you can activate Shigeki right away, which can be pretty cool. And yeah, I think this is a pretty nice take on Naya, in this case Dune, because it has these 4 colors, Avernus, and yep, I had some fun playing that. I think the best version, I'm going over the Avernus decks real quick because this is one of my favorite cards from the format. The best take on a deck with this, I think, might be Esper, because in this deck I also have, it's a little funny of course, I have 4 Devils in there, but I can't cast these, but it doesn't matter in this deck because you have so many ways to discard them. Of course, you have 4 Fiends, you have 4 Diviners, the Clement, the Silencer, the Evangel, all of these can discard. And you don't need to play the Devil, by the way. I think you can just play Esper with Ascent from Avernus and just have a decent deck. But yeah, that's pretty much the idea to also play the Devil, because then when you cast your Avernus, you just kind of win, right? Like, it's very hard to beat this deck when you cast, or let's say resolve Avernus in case they would have counter magic. So yeah, that's maybe always like an idea for a deck with this card to maybe play best of 1, but this deck can just play best of 3, right? Because you can just play so many good Cyber cards and just board out the Devil, right? Board out the Avernus. Like if they're playing Graveyard Hate, whatever, you just play some strong Esper creatures, and yeah, you can also just put in more Sheldreds or whatever, but yeah, that's the idea for this. Maybe you have not seen this card in a deck like this. I just realized this card sounds like discard because you can discard a creature and then you can destroy a creature, which I think is pretty good. It's also in the last deck I brought up to, or one of the last decks I brought up to the channel, in the Mardu Madness deck for Historic. But yeah, I think this is interesting because it is a creature. You need as many creatures as possible for Avernus, but still want to have some interaction, right? The downside is that it's not so easy to enable, and of course you do need a creature in hand. But if you have a Devil, you're happy. If you have a Gravekeeper or a Danik, you're happy, right? Because they have Disturb. So yeah, that's the idea of those. And Danik, of course, really great because he protects your graveyard. This card's really nice. I already talked about him before. Mills for cards, so perfect. I found Chaos in here. It's mainly because of Diviner of Fates, because if you have too many Avernus, let's say 2 Adrene hand, which sometimes can happen, right? I mean, you can't discard them in general, but if you have a Diviner, you can then discard Avernus and have a good chance of hitting a card you can actually use, right? Because you just need 1 Avernus, maybe a second as a backup, but you just need 1, right? And he can just make them into Chaos Reconstruction. Not certainly, of course, but there's a good or a reasonable chance to hit this, and of course the card is still great in the deck, right? Yep, that's that, I think. So let's go to the next one. Yeah, the last one is then Mardu Avernus. This is the Mardu take on Avernus. I really tried everything, as you can see. So this also has Crucius, of course, which is a super good payoff for the deck. So the thing with this deck, I think, is that you get to play an actually decent deck without having any Avernus shenanigans going on in general, because those cards are just good, right? Harvest is good, Crucius is good, Fable is good, Kayla can be quite good if they don't answer it. The Specialist is nice. This is a great value engine, and yeah, the Angel is great, of course, as well. So I think this is just a pretty conservative take, if that makes sense. Like, just not going too much on the combo thing, but you can still just win if you play that card with Devils in the graveyard. So I think this is pretty cool. Link in description. Then last but not least, we have Esper. Now, I have put this in the end because this is actually kind of a standard deck. This is my go-to standard deck when I'm trying to finish high on the ladder at 250 or 1200. So this is a pretty cool Flash / Esper creatures / soldiers deck. I have soldiers in there because this allows us to play the fortified beachhead, which is just really nice in the deck, because obviously it is a untapped blue-white land, which then allows us to play more pain lands, which I don't like to play too many in general anyways. So I think this card is just really nice for Esper. I have it in the standard version as well. And then we of course have a lot of untapped lands. By the way, I only have 3 plazas because I have those as because I have the Gavony Dawn God as a non-legendary. Now, the idea with the kind of like spin on Alchemy with this is Captain Eberhard, because he is a soldier and he's like really nice with Raffine, right? Because each time you draw a card, it costs 1 less. So basically, I mean, he has double strike, that's nice with Raffine, but if you get to untap with both Eberhard and Raffine and then attack, or have like more mana and get a Raffine or a Eberhard, then all the spells you cast get 1 mana reduction right away, which is just a very, very nice effect on a already decent 2-drop, right? So I think this is a cool card to include, and of course it's nice to tax the opponents to just have the reduction on your draw step in general. Technically you can have it from wedding announcement, but that is only relevant with like Urta if you draw it on the end step, so, or a Cathar Commando. But yeah, it's pretty, I think, personally cool, because I like creatures, and also a very good deck. Like I said, I use this to ladder all the time since Dominaria United, I think, when Urtai got released, and it's just really punishing for all those like greedy cast very expensive cards which have been around like for quite some while now in standard. And if you want to play creatures, I can highly recommend this. Also, cards like let's open up the sideboard. Cards like Brotherhood's End are really not that good versus this deck. This was one of the main ideas why I pivoted into this. Of course, Raffine and Adeline have 4 toughness. You can play this to draw a card. You cast your spells at instant speed, which is really good against that. But yeah, also having that like ward effect is really nice. I think the 1 ward is so good. Like making Go for the Throat costing 3 mana is just a no-go. Let's say they are on turn 4, like they cannot spend their entire turn just spend their like 4 mana to remove a creature, right? Because they might just not be able to use that 1 mana. So the 1 ward, maybe you know this already from Raffine, is just so relevant. So I really like this card. Obviously this is a payoff for playing cards at instant speed, and at instant speed we can, by the way, play Urtai, a Spectral Adversary. This is a turn 4 card as well. We actually don't have enough black for turn 2, I think, but I did this intentionally because I don't play this on turn 2. Like, what would I want to remove? I also always want to play either one of my 2-drop creatures or hold up Make Disappear on turn 2. This is for turn 4, like right turn 3. I also want to play a whole bunch of other cards than this. This is meant to be removing Sheldred's other 4-drops. That's why this is in here. Sheldred obviously pretty good versus Raffine, and this card I think is quite underestimated maybe in a deck like this, because in the late game this is often really what you're digging for, especially with the Dawn God. This is such a great argument for Dawn God because it does not draw, it gives you card selection, right? Because you look at the top 4 and then you get to pick a thing, and as I said, it's rather easy to go to night time with this deck, and in the late game you can then phase out all the relevant creatures of the opponent and just get in there, you know? Maybe you have to phase out a Sheoldred and have to get in with your big Raffine swing, which otherwise would not be possible because you would lose too much life. Like, you really want to have creatures in your deck to hit, especially with general of course, but especially with this, to be able to hit that are impactful, right? That get something relevant off the board. That's why there's a Brutal Cathar in there. You can play more, of course, if you like the card. I personally just don't like that card. I think it's so bad. Like getting at instant speed ambushed when you remove this card, they get their fat creature back. I'm just not a fan of Brutal Cathar, but of course in this deck, like he's best in a deck like this, right? Because you have this like Dynite stuff going on, and of course I have more of him in the sideboard. But yeah, another reason is because you play best of 3, and in best of 1, of course, you want removal spells for creatures, but in best of 3, you want to counter the creatures. You want to play value spells. Like the counters are very, very, very relevant and mostly what you want. You don't have to remove, like, I don't know, soldiers. And speaking of soldiers, this was my take on a better soldiers deck, by the way, because I was doing pretty well with soldiers in a best of 3 standard and was winning quite some games. One argument for that was, I think, by running quite some counter spells like make disappears and stuff in the main and sideboard, but I had trouble versus Brotherhoods and I had trouble versus interaction because you play 3 mana 2/2s or 2/3s. It's so bad because they get removed by cutdown. Like, I'm not sure if soldiers makes a lot of sense in best of 3. Yeah, I know there's some good players having success with this, but I think this is just mainly because of the counter spells, and soldiers is good on the play. I just don't think they're good on the draw. But this deck is always good, I think. I think this is one of the best options you can go for in standard BO3 right now when it comes to a creature deck. And yeah, sideboard is pretty good as well, I think. Yeah, you can check it out in the description as well. And yeah, those are the decks I wanted to cover. Yeah, I know Alchemy is not too popular, but maybe one or the other person got some interest with the last release of the new cards. They're not too exciting compared to the release that happened before, right? Because it had like Crucius and Yasel and all these like strong cards, but yeah, most of these decks don't have the cards from the last set anyways. For those two, I have now some gameplay coming up so you can see how they do, like the Vexyr deck and the Poison deck. Again, those are meant to be more like fun deck, which you can play on the constructed ladder. They're still good, I think, they're playable, but those are not, you cannot compare this to any broken stuff going on. So yeah, with that being said, thanks for watching so far. Enjoy maybe some gameplay, and yeah, maybe also another note, I'm not sure when the next video would be coming up because I'm trying another project right now on another channel which involves a hobby of mine. I like to voice act, and I have a link for that in the like channel info section if you want to check that out. But yeah, I will still post, I'm just not sure when this will be. Alright, thanks for watching guys, and see you next time. Oh, yeah.